Welcome, everybody, back to another episode of the Trans Plan, your go-to podcast for transgender history. As always, I'm your host, Mari. And today it is an absolute pleasure to have you all here on this Sunday afternoon. I hope you all enjoyed your 4th of July week/weekend, because obviously the 4th was on a Thursday, so it's a little different, but I still don't mean that. I don't want you all to enjoy yourselves, basically, is what I'm trying to say. We're in season 6 now. And each and every time I look at the analytics for this podcast, they continue to grow. So I want to say thank you all to my new and reoccurring listeners for taking the time out of your weekend to listen to a very quick 15-20 minute episode. It means a lot. I started this podcast during the pandemic, got a little bit too busy with my regular life, decided to come back to this because I think it's really important to have a history podcast that you all can listen to learn more about the trans community. So I appreciate you all for taking the time out to do that. And like I said, to continue to support the podcast too as well. This means a lot. So I'm hoping that this can be something that happens on a larger scale rather than just on whatever streaming platform you're listening on. So small milestones, small steps, but I'm sure bigger things can happen, like a tour and a Patreon, which I'll talk about a little bit later on, and all that good stuff. So as I always like to do, I'd like to thank all of my listeners for coming in. New listeners, welcome to Transgender Plan, your go-to podcast for transgender history. If you are new, with this being season 6, this podcast serves as a platform for education. I want you all to be able to have a better understanding, promote inclusivity, spark conversations about the trans community. I'm really using my expert knowledge and resources to help you further your learning. So each episode is intentionally designed to be 15 to 20 minutes, concise yet comprehensive. Like I said, I want to give you all something to start with, and then you can learn more along the way. So thank you for taking the time out to listen to the podcast today. If you are a returnee, I always like to say thank you so very much for continuing to support this podcast in whatever aspect you do, or whatever. Damn, what's the word I'm looking for? It's a word, and it's blanket over right now, but it's like right on the tip of my tongue. Basically, however you support the podcast, continue to support the podcast the way that you do, because it means a lot. And obviously, with the counts of numbers going up, the subscriber counts going up, that means that we are getting more people involved in spreading more information as best as we possibly can about the trans community. So thank you all so much for continuing to support as well. With that, today I have a brand new episode about someone that most of you all may be familiar with, depending on what generation you were born in. It is possible that a lot of Gen Zers may not know about this individual, but I'm not going to say that that's 100% true or false. But I do know that for our jazz fans who are listening to this podcast, you are very familiar with this individual as well. So today, I actually want to dive into the life and legacy of Billy Tipton, who was a jazz musician whose story actually impacts transgender history. That you all know, well, depending on who you are, you may or may not know about Billy Tipton. So that's what I want to get into today for today's episode. And today, I hope that you all enjoy that. So let's get started. Billy Tipton was born Dorothy Lucille Tipton on December 29th, 1914 in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Now, Billy Tipton was a talented jazz musician who lived most of his life in the public eye, yet kept one significant aspect of his identity hidden until after his death. Now, his story is not just one of musical talent, but also one of resilience and complexity in the face of societal norms. So from a young age, Billy showed a keen interest in music, particularly jazz, which was gaining popularity during the 1920s and 1930s. Despite the challenges of being a woman in a male-dominated industry, Billy pursued his passion for music with determination. Now, by the early 1940s, Billy Tipton began living as a man in a decision that would define the rest of his life. During the time, he actually adopted the name Billy Lee Tipton and began performing in various jazz bands. And this was a time when gender norms were rigid and unforgiving, which is why Billy making the decision was incredibly brave, but also risky as well. Now, Billy's talent on the piano and saxophone quickly earned him a reputation as a very skilled musician, and he played in numerous bands. And by the 1950s, he was actually leading his own jazz trio. Now, the Billy Tipton trio became quite popular. They were performing at clubs and releasing several albums, and despite the success, Billy remained, guarded about his personal life, often avoiding situations that may reveal his assigned gender at birth. Now, for many, like I said, for you who may not know, Billy Tipton's music actually brought joy to many. And I remember growing up personally for myself, my family is very big on music. My mom and I like to go to like jazz restaurants, who like to play, and I like to take my friends sometimes, or anyone that I'm dating at the time as well, to kind of like jazz oriented events, because I think jazz is a very beautiful art of music. And I remember Billy Tipton's music being played, I believe, by my grandmother one time when we were in the car, and I was like, "This is pretty dope," And this is before I knew about the LGBTQ plus community, so it's very new for me to actually learn more about Billy Tipton's life, and not really knowing too much about it at the time. And I was younger when I heard this music. But like I said, coming into my identity and learning more about, people who I may have came across but never knew their identities, Billy was actually one of those. So, his ability to be able to navigate the complexities of identity in a very restrictive society is a testament to his resilience, right? When we really think about it. And his story is a powerful reminder of the lengths to which individuals will be able to go to live authentically, even today, like not even just back then, but even today as well. Even when faced with very overwhelmingly societal pressures, especially being as big as he was during this time. People, like I said, asking him personal questions about his life, what we basically see today, with like TMZ or social media or whatever. People want to be all up in your business, learn more about what you're doing, outside of whatever, capacity that you may have, some type of fame or influence. So it's the exact same way, So in the 1970s, arthritis actually forced Billy to retire. And by 1989, he had suffered from an untreated peptic ulcer that got hemorrhaged. And in 1989, January, that Tipton, who actually had a couple of sons, called for emergency services and paramedics. And during this time of when that happened, that's when they discovered that Billy was actually assigned female at birth. And this revelation actually shocked everyone. And the two sons, actually ended up changing their last names afterwards. We'll talk about that in a second as it relates to Billy's legacy and the discovery of how this all happened, as I kind of just mentioned now. But when we think about privacy for all of us in some sort of capacity, right? A lot of us don't disclose a lot of things. Like for me, people who know that I'm trans know that I'm trans. If not, they don't know, right? I don't go out when I meet new people immediately and be like, "Hey, I'm trans." You know what I'm saying? I'm very passing as it relates to the aesthetic side of it. So a lot of times if I didn't tell anybody that I had transition, like if none of anyone who knew me now, aside from obviously like my parents and stuff like that, if I never came out and told people that, if I don't have a platform and tell people this, if I don't obviously do this for a living, if something was to happen to me and I blew up or something like that, you know what I'm saying? My might be the same exact way as like Billy's life will be. So, we had to think about the privacy of, people, and also too as well, kind of the life that people want to live should be kept to them, and whoever they are close to as well. I think that a lot of times in today's times, a lot of people want to be in everybody's business. They want to learn about, being trans is just this one thing or this one thing or that one thing, and it's not the case. We just want to live. And a lot of times we don't have to disclose a lot of them things unless we feel like it is appropriate to do so. Very similar like coming out the closet, right? So to continue, Billy's secret was not discovered until his death in 1989. And the revelation that he was assigned female at birth shocked many, including actually his family. However, it also brought to light the challenges faced by transgender individuals, particularly those who lived in times when acceptance and understanding were far less common. So to kind of backtrack a little bit, in 1933, Tipton actually began binding his chest and dressing as a man to work with jazz musicians. His opportunities for women, like I said, were very limited at this time. And initially, Tipton presented as male only on stage, but by 1940, he fully adopted his name, Billy Lee Tipton, and also a male identity. So, years before, where he had to put on this facade, he decided that, hey, like this is where I feel comfortable. This is who I am. This is where I want to make the full transition to identify as Billy Lee. And he achieved modest success in 1950s and 60s, including getting his first, recording contract. And Tipton kept his gender a secret, claiming that a car accident had damaged his genitals and chest, which explained why he had to bound his chest if people were to ever see him, out in public without a shirt on, stuff like that. So although he never legally married, especially during this time because, same-sex marriage wasn't around. It didn't exist at the time. Obviously, that wasn't until 2016, but there were 5 women who called themselves Mrs. Tipton, which a nightclub performer, one in particular, Kitty Kelly, became the most significant really out of all that. So in 1961, Tipton and Kelly adopted 3 sons that obviously were quote unquote adopted, but not legally recognized because adoptions weren't legally recognized at this time. So basically kind of like adopted 3 sons. So the story of Billy Tipton has since become an important part of transgender history. And the reason why is because it highlights the struggles and triumphs of living authentically in a world that often demands conformity. Conformity. And Billy's life has inspired many within the transgender community and beyond, serving as a reminder of the importance of being able to understand self-acceptance and the courage it takes to defy societal expectations. So as I think about Billy's impact on transgender history alone, just specifically that, as I mentioned, Billy's story has had a significant impact on the transgender community and the broader fight for gender equality because his life, which defines societal norms and expectations, challenges the traditional narratives of gender and highlights the diverse and complex experiences of transgender individuals throughout history. Like I said, this is back in the 1900s, so early 1900s, or kind of mid as well, because it was like from like the 1930s to the 60s. So, a good 30-year run, right? And by living authentically, even in secret, to be honest, Billy paved the way for future generations to embrace their identities more openly and courageously. And his story serves as a powerful reminder of the strength and resilience of the transgender community in the face of adversity. So as I think about in the most recent years of this discovery, right, the story of Billy Tipton has been revisited and celebrated in various forms of media, including like documentaries, books, and even, theatrical productions as well. And these works aim to shed the light on the multifaceted contributions to both his music, but also to transgender history as well. This is ensuring that his legacy is remembered and honored. And, throughout these explorations, audiences actually gain a deeper understanding of the challenges he had faced and the triumphs he had to achieve, making his story really an enduring source of inspiration and education for all. So, as I mentioned earlier, I think the biggest thing that I want to use as a key takeaway for this episode, and if you are new here, I do like key takeaways to kind of sum up basically what I talked about in the last 10, 15, 20 minutes. The But today I want to do a little bit different because I think the most important thing out of this story as a key takeaway, aside from Billy's legacy, is that we should be able to respect everyone's story and be able to take into account the importance of self-acceptance, because Billy was like, hey, this is not who I am. This is who I want to be. And I'm going to accept that and live my life, the way that I want. But also, like I said, respecting privacy and everyone else's story, because Billy, like I said, never told anyone. Like I said, even his kids was like, look, I'm going to change my last name because I didn't even know this about my own parent, And a lot of times, and I know that today with social media being the biggest thing, that everybody feels like we need to know everybody's story. We do not. You don't need to know everybody's story. I think that being able to privately live the life that you have planned for yourself does not require us to disclose any information unless we decide that we want to. So Billy's identity being exposed, without his consent, obviously because of his passing, was one, yes, more, in my opinion, shedding a bad light than a good one. The good thing is that, like, we do have stories of people back in the day where we can be able to say, hey, I didn't know that this person lived like this. It's inspiring because at a time, like I said, when being trans was not welcomed or accepted and etc., that people were still out here living a life that they chose without worrying about what everyone else had to say, and things like that. So invasion of privacy is the biggest thing. Here, being able to respect people's stories, respect what they do in their own private time is the biggest thing for me. But also, like I said, being able to, like I said, think about what's best for you. And I think that's what Billy decided to do. Aside from, like I said, being more of a male-dominated industry, which at this time it is true, that he said, like, hey, once I make this decision, this is how I'm going to live out the rest of my life, and I'm going to be happy with it. And I think that's exactly what Billy was. So those are my takeaways for today's episode. As I conclude this, I want us to reflect on Billy Tipton's life. His story really is a powerful reminder of the resilience and courage it takes to live authentically in the face of very big societal pressures during this time. And I do think that, I do know that Billy Tipton's legacy continues to inspire and educate, like I said, remind us of the importance of acceptance and understanding in our world today. Because as you can tell, had a very successful music career. So people accepted Billy, who he was, even though he didn't have to disclose that information. They just loved him for who he was, which is the biggest thing, especially in today. It's just letting people live their lives, and just accepting and loving them and understanding them as they are, So with that, I'd like to thank you all for joining us for today's episode today of the Trans Lesson Plan. If you have not done so yet, if you enjoyed today's episode, please don't forget to subscribe, depending on whatever streaming services that you're currently using. Please leave a review. I've seen a couple of new reviews come in, and I greatly appreciate all of my listeners for writing reviews. If you can leave a review, please do. The biggest are out there, and I'm trying to get Apple to monitor those as time progresses, because it has been a pain. But please leave a review. Please subscribe. If you want to follow us on social media, you can follow us at the Trans Lesson Plan on Instagram and Twitter. If you want to follow me, the host, Mari, you can follow me at mariiiwrld. That's MAR3ISWRLD. I have a special announcement coming up as it relates to Patreon. So stay tuned for that to drop soon. And also as well, we have merch. Y'all, we have some merch. So if you want to support the podcast in any way, shape, or form, you can absolutely purchase merch. I will drop the link in the description. I'll also drop it on our social media accounts. So if you want to take a look at that to see where you can buy merch, nothing too crazy, just some shirts and some mugs and stuff like that, that has the podcast on it. So I'm working with a graphic designer to get more fancy stuff going on. But if you want to purchase some merch from us, super affordable, just helps us keep this boat rolling. But until then, I hope you all enjoy the rest of your weekend. Enjoy the next week. And I cannot wait to give you all a brand new episode next Sunday, right here on the Trans Lesson Plan. Hope you all have a great rest of your weekend, and peace.